In some cases of possession, it is believed to be caused by an entity, someone who is deceased and is unaware that they are deceased. Some of these entities may be malicious, which could help to explain poltergeist activities, like rapping noises in the wall and vases breaking. In Brazil, this type of infestation is so openly accepted that some psychiatrists and psychologists even speak of therapeutic exorcisms and use an exorcism ritual to help heal their patients. In other cases, it could be an entity with a message to pass on. This is often the case when we speak of mediums who allow their body to be a channel for an entity. If we take a look at religion, we can see a lot less tolerance in this area. When it comes to possession, either you're filled with the Holy Spirit or you're possessed by the devil. And if you're possessed by the devil, the only way to avoid going to hell is to be exorcised. The science community is the final player in this controversial debate. Although more and more psychologists and psychotherapists are accepting infestation by a foreign entity as an explanation for certain behavioral problems, I would say that the medical community as a whole views the concept of possession as backwards, middle-aged thinking to cover up clearly identified psychological pathologies.
In 1993, Gisane Desfaits moved into an apartment building in Hull, Quebec. It was the beginning of a horrendous nightmare. Memories of her brother Régis, who had died several years earlier, kept coming back to haunt her. He seemed to be everywhere. He was in her dreams, and he even seemed to be present when she was awake.
8 years after his death, I moved into an apartment. It didn't suit me, but I wanted it. There was something in me pushing me to sign the lease. And it was in that apartment that everything happened. Objects would move. I could hear his voice, and I would see his image when I looked at myself in the mirror. Everywhere I went, I felt a presence within me.
In September 1994, following a friend's advice, Gisane decided to contact Nicole, who was a medium.
I called Nicole, and she came to my place. We held a seance during which she saw my brother very clearly.
Through the psychic, Gisane learned that not only was her brother present, but other spirits as well. And they weren't the friendly variety. Régis was there to protect her and to warn the young single mom of an imminent threat that was approaching. Evil forces were preparing to strike.
We were sitting in the kitchen, and all of a sudden there was a strong wind blowing and a putrid smell that was making us nauseous. It was pretty gross. I could see black crosses and blood on the walls. It stunk. Everything was happening very quickly, as if we weren't supposed to see it. Nicole was very afraid, said she didn't work with that kind of energy. She was leaving. As she got up to leave, I wanted to get up too. But it was as if someone invisible grabbed my wrist and held me down. My wrist was very sore. I wanted to shout out to Nicole to come back, but I couldn't. I heard her say, "Okay, I'll stay." I told her my wrist and arm were sore. And she said, "My God, he's inside you. Your arm is all black."
With Nicole's help, Gisane was able to free herself of this mysterious force that was trying to possess her. Free, but for how long? On September 22nd, 1994, as she was heading to bed, Gisane was surprised to hear noises coming from her living room. She had the impression that someone was spinning her work chair.
There was just one wall separating the living room from where I was. I gathered all the courage I could muster and went into the living room. I saw the chair, which was no longer at the desk where it was supposed to be. It was in the middle of the living room, and it started moving, heading directly towards me.
Gisane backed out of the room in horror. She tried to stabilize her breathing. Then she heard other noises, the sound of toys. The thing, whatever it was now in her son's room.
I went into the hallway, and I could hear the noises getting louder since I was getting closer. When I got into the bedroom, the noises stopped. My son was sleeping peacefully. I tried to pick him up. I was shaking, trembling with fear. I couldn't get to him. It was as if there was an energy field around him blocking me.
Mon garçon.
She went back to the living room. She couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed the phone, and buttons were being pressed randomly, as if invisible fingers were playing a tune on her phone. She finally managed to call her friend José.
When she answered, I told her, "Come right away, don't even bother getting dressed. I'm totally paralyzed here." I tried to get up and I couldn't. It was as if from the waist down I was a block of cement. I couldn't budge. When she said, "Okay, I'm coming right away," at that moment, my second line began to ring. I said goodbye to José and answered the second line. It was Nicole. She had no idea what was happening to me. She had no way of knowing. And she told me to grab my son and get out of my apartment immediately. I told her I couldn't. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move.
Jézanne could no longer hear the medium's words. Her eyes were riveted on a strange sight playing out before her. Multicolored dots appeared, forming the figures of 3 people. Suddenly, she heard a knock at the door. It was José. Jézanne went to answer the door, and together the women went into her son's room where he lies sleeping soundly. José had no problem picking him up. She did not sense the electric fence that had prevented Jézanne from getting to her son. The 2 women left the apartment immediately. Jézanne went back home a few days later. Days went by with no further unusual events. The situation took a turn for the worst when Jézanne invited a couple of friends over, and Vanessa went to the washroom.
We heard Vanessa screaming, as if her finger was stuck in the door or something. She was screaming at the top of her lungs. We ran to the bathroom and asked Vanessa what was wrong. My bathroom door doesn't lock, but we couldn't get it open. Then, suddenly, the door flew open. I fell on the floor, and the door closed by itself. Vanessa was on the floor between the wall and the toilet. She was staring at the fan on the ceiling and was trembling all over. It was obvious that she had been traumatized. She kept screaming and yelled, "Something scary just came out of the fan." I told her to stop screaming, get a hold of herself. It was just a fan. That was when she fainted. I turned, since I wanted to get her out of there, and the door wouldn't budge again. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw her get up. I turned around, and she tried to talk to me. She kept saying, "You're not getting out of here, you're not getting out of here," but with a deep voice. It was very scary, and I wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. And then she put her hands out in front of her and started moving towards me.
Jézanne managed to get her friend out of the washroom, but Vanessa had literally gone insane. She began running around the apartment, speaking incoherently, her body shaking with convulsions. Faced with this uncontrollable behavior, Jézanne and Etienne had no choice but to call 911.
When we arrived at the apartment, her respiratory rate was about 50 to 60 breaths per minute. We sat her down in a chair, and I tried to get her to breathe more slowly until she went unconscious. At that moment, I freed up her breathing passage so that she could breathe easier. All of a sudden, she opened her eyes, and what I felt at that moment shocked me. I stood up with a start, knocking over the chair. She slid down off the chair and began slithering around the floor like a snake.